us now, Democratic Congresswoman from Alabama, representing Alabama's 7th District, which happens to include Tuscaloosa. Representative Terry Sewell. Congressman Sewell is the freshman class president of the Democratic class and holds the distinction of being the only Democrat in Alabama's congressional delegation. Met you a couple months back. Yep. Impressed with the work you're doing.
Well, we're so excited to welcome you to Tuscaloosa. Welcome you back.
It's great. It's great to be here. Let me ask you, first of all, most importantly, how is the community? The community that I feel like is home to me, and how is your community and Joey? How is this community recovering from the nightmare of the tornado?
Well, we're doing well. Thank you for asking. I think that the April storms really devastated not just Tuscaloosa, but parts of Birmingham, parts of the Black Belt that I represent. But I'm happy to report that we're on our way to recovery and rebuilding. I know that the city of Tuscaloosa, its mayor and city council, have put forward a Tuscaloosa Forward plan, strategic plan, as well as having a citizens advisory council.
So the government, you've got the help that you've needed from the federal and state governments?
I think that the coordination on both the local, state, and federal government has really been quite commendable. I think obviously learned lessons from Katrina so that we're not repeating some of the bad stuff that happened. But I'm very pleased. You know, out of this devastation, there's a great opportunity for this city to not only rebuild, but rebuild stronger.
No doubt about it. So let's talk about Alabama and the news for different reasons right now. The New York Times talking about Alabama's immoral immigration law. You had a story in the Times about immigrants quietly slipping away at night, leaving the state, and it's been called, quote, a humanitarian crisis. And you look at some of the requirements for this new law. It requires that all schools verify the immigration status of children enrolling for the first time. Let me ask, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with figuring out whether children who are in public schools are citizens of Alabama citizens?
Look, I know that we have a broken immigration policy, and I know that the federal government needs to try to fix that. I don't think that we're going to get to it until after the next election.
Why is that? Why is that? Because the president talked about fixing immigration years ago, but he stays away from it.
I think it's polarizing. I think that's right, Mika. And I know for Alabama, I really think that we've kind of overstepped our boundary, and it's way too aggressive, and I think way too broad. I don't think that teachers should be enforcers of immigration policy. I don't think that good Samaritans who are passing by can't be able to pick up someone who needs.
So let's talk about the Good Samaritan. Do you think that is the case, that if, let's say, I helped an illegal immigrant, took care of them, if they were hungry or if they were had medical needs, could I be arrested?
The Alabama law, as it stands now, would penalize you, would enforce if you were caught, you know, taking an immigrant, transporting an immigrant, that you would be in violation of that law. So I think it's overly much, and I think that I know what our legislators are trying to get at, but I think that there's a better way to do it than to make teachers and Good Samaritans enforcers of the law.
Right.
So how's it going for you in Washington? This has got to be, I remember listening to you, where were we speaking?
We were talking to Steny Hoyer and the whip, the Democratic whip group.
And you stood out to me, but there are a lot of challenges coming to Washington and trying to get a lay of the land and then trying to push things through. So two questions. First of all, how are you faring through this and what have you learned? And then I want to ask you about the big picture, and that's the conversation in Washington and why everybody doesn't like Washington right now.
Well, look, I came in at not such a great time, but I have to tell you that we are, we're persevering. I share the frustration of the American public that we in Congress seem to be more infighting and more politics and working and focusing on their needs. I can tell you that this is my first elected office, and I know that the people of the 7th Congressional District of Alabama didn't send me there to add to their problems. They sent me there to help solve their problems. So I've been in office now a little more than 280 days, not that I'm counting.
Right.
but I'm glad to finally be talking about jobs. I mean, mean, jobs is where it's at.
Yeah.
Getting this economy back going again.
That's what people are focused on.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I was sent in here to do, is to help bring economic development and resources and opportunities, job creation, stimulate this economy, and get folks back hired again. So I'm very happy that we're finally focusing on jobs. It's very disconcerting that we're so polarizing, even on the jobs issue.
The divide continues. Mark Halpern's up in Washington, and he has a question for you. Mark.
Congresswoman, what is the connection between Wall Street and job creation as you see it?
Can you hear him? We can't hear
What's
him.
the connection between Wall Street and job creation as you see it? Mark Halpern asked.
Well, look, you know, I worked in a big law firm before I actually came back to Alabama to practice law, and I really think that what we're witnessing with the whole protest of Wall Street is just a frustration of American public, and I think that I think that they're part of the problem, but those of us who are now representing Main Street really want people to focus on their needs and not on the needs of bankers. I mean, we bailed them out. I understand why we did that, but now it's time for us to really focus on the American people and getting them back to work.
Does it make sense, though, for the tax brackets to be the way they are? Does it make sense for General Electric to pay less in taxes than your constituents?
It does not make sense, and I think that the president
but even Republicans say they agree with that. There's a perfect chance, a perfect opportunity for real tax reform, and yet we can't even do that.
And I agree with you. There's a real chance for tax reform, and why we're not willing to tax millionaires and billionaires while average American citizens are struggling is beyond me. And I think that it's a hard position for the Republican Party, with all due respect, to actually make sure
Step forward and do that.
Exactly.
Let me ask you one other question too, because this is going to be part of a big deal if we get a big budget deal. What about entitlements, Social Security, Medicare? The numbers don't add up. You know, in the 50s, you had 15 people working for every one person on Social Security. Now you've got 3 people working for every one person on Social Security. Soon it'll be 2 for 1. Those numbers don't add up. We need real entitlement reform, don't we?
I agree. I think everything has to be on the table, but I can tell you one thing. We should not be putting entitlement programs on the table unless the other side of the aisle is willing to put some revenues on the table.
Both sides have to come together.
And I know that everything has to be on the table, but I can tell you right now, we cannot spend our way out of, nor cut our way out of this recession.
Right.
We have to have a balanced approach.
No doubt
and so I'm in for a balanced approach, and I can tell you that the folks that I represent, the seniors that I represent, want me to stand firm for Social Security and Medicare. They want to see it sustained, but at the same time, they also want to make sure that we get out of the waste, fraud, and abuse out of the system as well. So I mean, there's definitely a common ground that we can find on both tax reform, entitlement reform, and actually revenues, bringing more revenues to the
Congresswoman Terry Sewell,
thank you so much. Give me a big roll tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. You don't sound like
you're
you're
good.
All right, that's great.
Coming up next, if you thought the Massachusetts